The representative of the governor of Lagos State, the Honorable Commissioner for Basic and Secondary Education, Mr. Jamiu Tolani Ali Balogun, the Chair of the Board of Trustees of ICOBA, Mr. Bode Thorpe, the Chairman of the Board of Governors of Igbobi College, Sir Babatunde Shobamo, and members of the Board of Governors of Igbobi College, the President of ICOBA, Chief Yemi Badejo Okusanya, and our First Lady, Mrs. Oyinkan Badejo Okusanya, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, members of the Executive of ICOBA, former Presidents of ICOBA, our host and Principal of Igbobi College, the Venerable Joseph Adedeji, members of staff of Igbobi College, present students of the college, fellow noble Nigerians, seniors and juniors alike, especially seniors Pa Elliot Yemi and Pa Frank Ig Mokwede. Also, seniors who are here, seniors Eson Kehinde Smith, Keleko and Daru Owe. Also the Senuoke family for supporting this great event. On this occasion of the 94th Founders Day anniversary of our great school, Igbobi College, we must pause to honor and acknowledge the remarkable foresight and generosity of its founders, the Anglican Communion and the Methodist Church of Nigeria, whose shared vision and resources laid the foundation for an enduring institution such as we have today. We also recognize with deep gratitude the generations of principals, vice principals, teachers, and housemasters whose selfless dedication to their calling shaped not only the intellects but the character of generations of students. Through their discipline, their care, and unwavering commitment, they built the strong pillars upon which our lives and achievements continue to rest. We further acknowledge the invaluable work being carried on today by the current staff of the college, who guide the academic pursuits of our students, and perhaps even more importantly, mold their lives and values. And their role is perhaps more remarkable, as their task is undertaken in an era far more complex than the one many of us knew, an age in which young minds are pitched, as it were, against the relentless distractions of social media and the pressures of an increasingly complicated world. Their steadfast service remains a source of pride and gratitude to us all. Then let me thank the executive of ICOBA, led by our indefatigable president, Chief Yemi Badejo Okusanya, for the honor done to me by the invitation to give this first Igbobi College Founders Day anniversary lecture. I'm deeply grateful for the opportunity to speak on the topic Endowment for Legacy, Building Generational Strength for Educational Institutions in Nigeria. It's a rather broad topic. Aside from the length of the topic itself, it's a very broad topic. And perhaps the greatest mistake you can make with a lecture is to give a professor a broad topic. Chances are that we will not leave here till tomorrow morning. But I will not repay the generosity of ICOBA with the infliction of a long lecture. I've tried to narrow down the topic to what I think may be more relevant to our gathering here, which is Endowment for Legacy, Building Generational Strength for Secondary Schools in Nigeria, and in particular, our own school, Igbobi College. Just so that we're all on the same page, I think we ought to define what an educational endowment is. It is a pool of money or assets donated by individuals or corporates and set aside as a fund to financially support a school, a college, or educational program for the long term. The principal sum of money is usually invested, and the school uses the earnings, which may come in the form of interest or dividends, or a small percentage of it each year, to fund things like scholarships, financial aid, teachers' salaries, research, building and maintenance of school facilities, libraries, programs, and sometimes the operating costs of the school. In the context of our own topic, legacy, of course, then means the lasting impact and value that an educational institution leaves behind beyond its present generation. So endowment for legacy would then mean intentionally building permanent financial and institutional strength that allows the Nigerian educational institution, in this case our own institution, Igbobi College, to serve future generations with the same or greater impact as of today. Throughout history, societies that endured were not the ones that focused solely on the present, but those that took responsibility for the future. They understood a simple truth, that we are temporary, but institutions are meant to be permanent. It was Edmund Burke who reminded the world that society is a partnership, not only among the living, but also between the dead and the unborn. These ideas converge on one powerful principle. Legacy is a duty, it is not a luxury, it is not an option. In Africa, we express this wisdom even more simply. We do not inherit the land from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. And the same is true of our educational institutions. Universities, colleges, and schools do not belong to the current administrators, students, donors, or even governments that established them. They are held in trust for generations yet unborn. But the conversation about the endowment of schools is not merely about the provision of financial sustenance. It is also about sustaining cultures of standards, values, and norms that can sustain society. It is not just about continuity, but continuation of an ethos and a worldview. And rarely, only sufficient resources can assure that legacies are sustained. And whether a school such as ours will remain strong when today's leaders are gone, when economic cycles shift, and when tomorrow's students arrive with dreams that we may never personally experience. That is the essence of legacy. And that is the burden of every generation of beneficiaries of institutions or communities. Many of the world's most prestigious universities and secondary schools are backed by large endowments that sustain their operations over decades. For example, in the United States of America, members of the 8 Schools Association, including the Phillips Academy in Andover, have an endowment of 1.3 billion US dollars. The Phillips Exeter Academy also has a similar endowment in the same sum, about 1.3 billion US dollars. These are all secondary schools as well. Paul's School, the St. Paul's School, has an endowment of 747 million US dollars. And the Hotchkiss School, another one of these secondary schools, has an endowment of over 500 million US dollars. So they have amassed hundreds of millions to over $1 billion in endowment assets. The Middlesex School's endowment is about 220 million. These are the more modest ones. Other preparatory schools, like the Brooks School, hold over $100 million. In Europe, secondary schools are generally funded by government. But those that are funded by endowments are an exception. But a small group of historic UK independent schools, for example, rely heavily on endowments. Eton College, which is possibly the most famous of these colleges in Europe, has an endowment of over 750 million pounds. A fun fact about Eton College is that 20 of the 58 prime ministers of the United Kingdom attended Eton. 20 of the 58 since the UK's parliamentary system was founded. 20 of them attended Eton of the entire 58. There's Harrow School also and Winchester, both founded in the 16th century and each holding endowments and property assets running into the hundreds of millions of pounds. These are institutions founded in the 15th century, and they remain relevant today, they remain influential today, supporting scholarships, buildings, and long-term stability. These endowments help such schools to meet the demonstrated financial need and enhance academic offerings and maintain world-class facilities. But more importantly, financial independence enables schools to propagate a worldview, an ethos, standards and values that they hold dear. And this is crucial, that it is not just about maintaining the financial independence of schools or giving scholarships. It is more about the ability to then propagate a worldview, to propagate certain standards and certain values that we hold dear. What even more instructive, of course, is that most of the funds were donated by old boys of those schools, including friends and family of the old boys of the school. Every serious nation and every serious institution eventually confront the same question: what will outlive us? What will outlive us? We're here today because this institution, Igbobi College, made a transformative difference in our lives. We proudly wear our ties, our scarves, our caps, our cufflinks and pins, because we identify with the greatness of this institution. This institution was not built by government. It was built by an endowment. It was endowed by missionaries, Anglicans and Methodist missions, money from the sweat and tears of members of those missions. Although the school charged fees, these fees were well below the services offered, and the fees were not shared amongst themselves, as the organizations were not-for-profit organizations. Profit of whatever kind was plowed back into the development of the school. So we were beneficiaries of an endowment by two missionary organizations. They subsidized not just high-quality education, but they also created the moral and ethical and civic environment that has shaped our own outlook, our sense of right and wrong, and our views on integrity to this very day. I served in several governments at various times, but I was never able to be obsequious or to be a sycophant, because ingrained in me is an abhorrence of impre. I don't know how many of us know impre. I just could not see myself being an impre. A pejorative word, as you know, we used in those days for people who try too hard to impress seniors or impress the staff. Not only did I abhor it, I ensured that those who served with me did not get into the kind of praise singing that seemed so natural to others. Yet we learned respect for hierarchy, because we called even those who were a year ahead of us senior this or that. But we also learned balance, respect for others, with self-respect. Most Igbobi boys who served in public office had the same ethos, a high sense of integrity. So aside from scholarship, the school provided the environment to develop a complete man with a correct worldview. Many of the closest friends and associates I have today were made in Igbobi, and my most important impressions of morality, of service, and philanthropy were formed here. And I must say also that practically all of the inspiration, and I speak for myself and I'm sure many others, that I derived in order to be who I would later become, were formed right here. I remember listening to Mr. Daru. I remember listening to Senior Daru Owe then. Yeah. who was a debater, was one of the debaters now. He's here today. So that Rowe is here today. Of course, he was our senior at the time I was in my house. But listening to him, I made up my mind that I had to debate like Mr. Rowe. That I had to debate like him. He was a brilliant debater. And this is the shared experience of most of us here today. So secondary schools actually matter more than we give them credit for. Because leadership doesn't begin in government houses or in parliaments or boardrooms or cabinet meetings. It begins much earlier, in the discipline of a school timetable, in the regulated lights out, and waking up at 5:30 a.m., inspection, detention, cooperatives, SDM, developing the ability to counter the views of others, not with anger or bile, but reasoning and logic, in learning team spirit, fairness on the sports field, in encountering authority that is fair, is just and consistent. Rarely, by the time a Nigerian child turns 18, their ethical instincts, their intellectual confidence, their relationship with authority and sense of civic duty are already largely formed. So there's no question that the secondary school is where it all happens. So those of us who pass through Igbobi know this intuitively. The habits that sustained us later in life were not improvised in adulthood. They were formed right here. When secondary schools are unstable, when they are underfunded and unequal, leadership failure of society is not surprising. It's in fact inadvertently engineered. For many years after, especially after the takeover of schools in 1979, most of the high standards that many of us seated here were accustomed to fell. Funding dropped sharply, and the pastoral care that was provided by teachers who knew that they had standards to maintain also fell. In a few years, the Igbobi that we knew had practically disappeared. But perhaps the most important benefit, and just before I say so, of course, in the years that followed, a lot of effort has been made, especially by our old boys, the Old Boys Association, to sustain some of those standards, to pay in some cases for renovation and for improvement of facilities here in the college. All of that has happened, and of course, with the great work, the remarkable work that several teachers and the principals and teachers and other members of staff of this college have done since then. But perhaps the most important benefit of an endowment is the access that it may give to quality education regardless of means. So for Nigeria, as with many developing countries, there is a silent fracture. Talent separated from opportunity. We educate millions of secondary school students every year, yet access to high-quality secondary education is increasingly determined by household income and geography and connections. But brilliance exists everywhere, but support does not. Many capable Nigerian children will never experience what we experience at Igbobi. Teachers with time and authority and dignity, world-class laboratories, structured leadership, and moral formation, and a stable environment that allow talent to flourish. But the nation pays for this later, in weak institutions, in fragile public trust, and leadership that lacks depth. Nigeria already knows what excellence looks like. We already know what it looks like. Our early post-independence leaders did not emerge by accident. They were disproportionately shaped by a small number of secondary schools that were deliberately protected from volatility. Igbobi College, for example, King's College, St. Gregory's College, CKC in Onitsha, Methodist Girls High School here, Holy Child, CMS, Government College in Ibadan, Barewa College up north. And Barewa College, by the way, this is a school that produced the late Prime Minister, the Right Honorable Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, produced General Yakubu Gowon, produced the late General Muritala Mohammed, produced President Shehu Shagari, and the late President Umaru Yar'Adua. Queen's College also. And when you look at these colleges, the truth of the matter is that because of the sheer amount of investment in terms of resources and in terms of teaching of an ethos, they're able to produce the kinds of leaders that can actually shape countries. And we must always bear in mind that whatever we invest in a school is an investment in the future of the country. A lot of these schools that I've mentioned worked because they had stable funding, they had high quality teachers, they had merit-based selection, strong moral and civic formation. They were of course not perfect, but they were institutionally serious. When their own stability weakened, when these schools weakened, and practically all of them have weakened considerably over the years, standards also weakened. Not because Nigerians or Nigeria has changed, but because the systems for producing quality individuals have been completely weakened and in many cases compromised. So now, what do? I think I've made the point already that every good secondary school needs an endowment to give it the financial stability to propagate its philosophical objectives into the future. But today I want us to focus on what having a substantial endowment will mean for Igbobi and how we can raise and maintain such a fund. An endowment is not a one-time gift. It is in a sense capital that refuses to forget its purpose or its objective. For a school like Igbobi College, an endowment means attracting the best teachers, the ability to attract the best teachers, and to pay the best teachers, to pay them well. It means scholarships awarded by merit, not influence. It means facilities maintained without emergency appeals. It means leadership formation protected from budget cuts and academic standards and the Igbobi ethos insulated from any form of volatility. In simple terms, an endowment will turn our school into an intergenerational engine of excellence. Every one of us here today, we are in some sense a product of other people's foresight. Every one of us. We benefited from teachers whose sacrifices we did not fully pay for, facilities built by donors that we never met, standards preserved by generations before us. So we are in many senses a return on someone else's investment. The question now is, how will we ourselves in this generation give back? A 10 billion naira professionally managed endowment can sustain Igbobi College indefinitely. It can open its gates to the most brilliant boys, regardless of background, and shape Nigeria's future leaders in public service, in science and technology, in the professions, and educate generations that we, the donors, will never meet, but whose impact will be felt nationwide and possibly globally. The donors, of course, will be ourselves, old boys, including our old boys in diaspora, corporate partners and philanthropists. And those philanthropists, of course, are those that we are able to persuade to share our vision. And there are a few critical things I think that we should note. Developing an endowment fund is not a one-occasion fundraising activity. Of course not. It is not at all. It is a well-planned, long-term engagement with donors, usually old boys. It will involve setting up an office dedicated solely to the purpose of maintaining the endowment. That office will make frequent contacts with potential donors. I left the London School of Economics in 1981, yet almost without fail, every month, I get a newsletter, now by email. I used to get hard copies before from the school, giving me updates and also making the inevitable request for a donation. no matter how small. This is how to build an endowment. The marketing is so consistent that you can't ignore it. They let you know the progress the school is making, the laurels being won, the old boys or alumni that are making waves in business, the professions, the people who are excelling in the professions in public service, etc. If you do anything of note, they put you in the newsletter, put your face in the newsletter. You are made to feel the part of an institutional success that has gone on for decades, which is why many make provisions, even in their wills, for regular donations to their alma mater. When they've passed on, many still continue, of course, through these bequests to contribute to their schools. And I think it's important to note that it's not necessarily those who donate the big amounts that make up endowments. It is more those who donate consistently. Those who say every month, take out of my account X number of money, X amount of money, for a certain period of time, or for, or in perpetuity, depending. It is this sort of intentionality that will get results. An important point is the management of the endowment office. Proven competence, of course, is crucial. These must be people capable of marketing the school effectively. These days, technology makes communication even much easier. The transparent management of the fund by well-known fund managers will also be critical. I think it's also important for us to reflect on the ethos or the set of values that Igbobi established and represented, which we intend to be sustained. And this is of great importance, because the point of giving financial independence to our college is not just to provide high-quality education and expand opportunity for those who would not be Igbobians because they cannot afford our fees, but perhaps more importantly, to imbue all who pass through Igbobi with the same high moral, ethical, and civic values that we benefited from and that we know are critical in nation building, in the marketplace, and also in private life. What we may then do is to fully document these values and develop our curriculum and extracurricular activities which benchmark these values. We must be deliberate in the teaching and practice of the ethos of Igbobi. I'm especially excited that the steering committee of our proposed endowment fund will be chaired by none other than the former chairman of KPMG Africa, Mr. Kunle Lebute, who along with a very able team that have already been appointed, will bring their celebrated knowledge and experience to bear on this historic project. We will be asking all our members to contribute. And as I said, it's not about how much, it is about how consistent we can continue to, because this is a long-term enterprise, it's not one day. So let me end by reminding us that Igbobi College helped make us who we are. Now the future also asks something of us in return. An endowment is how we whisper to the future that we remember where we came from, and we would also prepare a place for others. It is time to build the Igbobi College endowment. Say.